There are certain words in our tradition that carry an emotional weight far beyond their literal meaning. One of those words is the word Nachamu, comfort. This past Shabbat was Shabbat Nachamu, and it took its name from the opening words of the Haftarah, the prophetic readings that accompany the Torah reading. This time from the prophet Isaiah. Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, comfort, comfort my people, says your God. And the timing is not coincidence. Only last week, we sat on the floor on Tisha B'Av, remembering the destruction of both temples, the exile of our people, and generations of tragedy. We read the book of Lamentations, whose poetry gives voice to grief without trying to soften it. And then almost immediately the mood changes. The prophet does not continue speaking about destruction. He now begins with comfort. And that transition raises an important question. What does comfort really mean? Many of us instinctively think of comfort as the end of pain. We assume that once we are comforted, the sadness disappears and life returns to normal. Yet that is not what Isaiah is describing. Jerusalem is still in ruins. The exile has not magically ended. The losses are very real. God does not ask the people to forget what happened or to pretend that it did not matter. Comfort is something much deeper. It is the ability to carry sorrow without allowing sorrow to become our entire identity. It is the strength to take another step even when the wounds have not completely healed. Jewish tradition has never taught us to deny grief. Instead, it teaches us that mourning has its seasons and rebuilding has its season as well. That is why Shabbat Nachamu follows Tisha B'Av. We are not leaping from despair to celebration, but we begin a slow journey from brokenness toward hope. And there is another detail in Isaiah's opening words that deserve our attention. God says, comfort, comfort my people. The command is not addressed to those who are suffering. It is addressed to the prophet. God is telling Isaiah to become a source of comfort for others. And perhaps that is because comfort rarely arrives on its own. More often, it comes through another human being. Most of us can remember moments when our lives were changed not by someone offering the perfect explanation, but by someone simply being present. A visit during Shiva, a phone call after difficult news, a meal left at the front door, a hand held in silence, or a friend who stayed long after everyone else had gone home. Those acts may seem small, yet they become the way God's compassion enters the world. The prophet reminds us that comfort is not merely something we seek, it is something we are called to give. Every one of us has the ability to fulfill Isaiah's command by becoming a source of hope for someone else. Those words have a particular resonance this year. Many of us are carrying an anxiety that extends beyond our personal lives. We have watched anti-Semitism spread with an intensity that many Jews have never experienced in their lifetime. Jewish students have been harassed on college campuses. Synagogues have increased security. Jewish businesses have been targeted. Ancient lies about our people have returned to the public discourse with an alarming confidence. Around the world, and even here at home, many Jews find themselves wondering whether it is safe to wear a kippah, a Magen David, a Star of David, or to speak openly about Israel or their Jewish identity. For those who grew up listening to parents and grandparents who survived the Holocaust or escaped Europe, these moments stir memories that run very, very deep. Now, history never repeats itself in exactly the same way, and we should be careful not to force comparisons that ignore the uniqueness of the Shoah. But at the same time, our people have learned that hatred often begins long before violence. It begins when prejudice becomes acceptable, when these lies are repeated often enough to sound believable, and when too many good people decide that someone else's problem is not their concern. That collective memory is part of who we are. It explains why so many Jews are feeling unsettled today. We remember because our history has taught us that vigilance is not pessimism, it is wisdom. Yet, memory alone has never sustained the Jewish people. If we look at the last century, we find a history marked by extraordinary trauma and equally extraordinary resilience. Our people endured the greatest catastrophe in history. Entire communities that had flourished for centuries disappeared. 6 million Jews were murdered simply because they were Jews. Survivors emerged carrying unimaginable loss, and many wondered whether Jewish life could ever recover. And yet it did. The State of Israel was established. Hebrew became the language of a thriving nation. Jewish communities grew across North America and around the world. Synagogues were built, schools opened, families were created, and Jewish life flourished in ways that would have seemed almost impossible in 1945. None of that erased the pain. Comfort is not the same as forgetting. The wounds remain part of our story, but they are not the whole story. That has been the pattern of Jewish history for thousands of years. The destructions of the temple gave rise to rabbinic Judaism. The expulsions from one land led to new centers of Jewish learning in another. The horrors of the 20th century were followed by one of the most remarkable periods of Jewish renewal that our people have ever known. Perhaps that is the deepest meaning of Shabbat Nachamu. The prophet is not asking us to ignore reality. He is inviting us to refuse to surrender to it. Our responsibility is to remain vigilant in the face of hatred and to stand proudly as Jews, to support one another, to strengthen our communities, and to ensure that fear never becomes the defining force of our life. The Jewish people have survived because every generation chose to answer darkness by creating more light, to answer to destruction by building and rebuilding, and to answer hatred by holding even more tightly to one another. As we begin these 7 weeks of consolation leading toward the high holidays, may Isaiah's words give us both comfort and courage. May we find the strength to be present for those who are hurting and have the confidence to live openly and proudly as Jews, and the faith to believe that our people's future will not be written by those who hate us, but by those who continue to build Jewish life with hope, with conviction, and with love. Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God.